The United States has once again threatened to take military action against North Korea. U.S. Secretary of State said that last week's missile strikes against a Syrian airbase were a warning to North Korea over its nuclear program. Speaking to American media, Rex Tillerson added Washington to undertake a likely response if Pyongyang became, quote, a threat to other nations. Tillerson's comments come as the U.S. has sent one of its aircraft carriers to the Korean Peninsula in a show of force against what Washington calls Pyongyang's reckless nuclear weapons program. Earlier, President Donald Trump threatened unilateral action against Pyongyang over its missile tests. North Korea says its missile and nuclear programs are meant to protect the country from U.S. hostility and aggression. And joining out of Bristol for more of the story, Mr. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist. A lot of people think, Mr. Gosling, that the U.S. is constantly trying to provoke North Korea, a country that's on edge and thinks that, large-scale, unprecedented maneuvers by South Korea and the U.S. are provocative.
Well, a lot of people around the world can't really work out why it is that the United States seems to be trying to provoke war in so many places. I can tell you why it is. It's because the effectively a criminal elite, that is the power elite in the United States, are failing economically. They're totally failing. The American economy is collapsing. Other economies around the world, like India and China, doing really well. And effectively, they're at the end of their little phase of empire. And so I think what they're doing is they're starting to lash out with a little bit of power that they've got left. Actually, I say a little bit. Actually, it's quite a lot of power. But what we've seen over the last few days, I think, is the collapse of Donald Trump. The new US president, a lot of people had hopes that he was going to make a difference, change things. Effectively, he's just caved in. He's done a massive U-turn into, he said he was not going to be doing any more foreign adventures. He certainly wasn't going to attack Syria. I think it was 25 tweets, wasn't it, where he said he wouldn't do things like that, and specifically about Syria. Now he's also looking at Korea. So, of course, it's not really, I don't think, Trump who's in charge. It's the neocons and the Pentagon and the arms industry that are driving US foreign policy. And they are making money out of war. And so that's what they want. They seem to want to push in various parts of the world. And there isn't really any accountability for people like Trump. He's just, I suppose, overawed by being surrounded in his cabinet by these neocon figures, banksters, these kinds of people.
And are you at all concerned how far this will escalate between Washington and Pyongyang?
Yes, it's possible. I mean, look, let's not forget, over the last few weeks, we've seen the judicial coup in South Korea. In March this year, Park Geun-hye, I think that's how you pronounce it, she's been ousted. I would imagine that she's somebody that has been pushing back against the United States, because the context in Southeast Asia, and I mean, I would say Channel News Asia is the big TV channel around there. I've been watching some of that recently. The coverage has been appalling. No questions being asked at all about this judicial coup. There has been this John Pilger film, the Australian-British filmmaker, called The Coming War on China, which I'd recommend if you haven't seen it. Everybody should see this film. It came out in November last year, and he talks about the dozens of US bases that have been created around China. A giant noose around China is how the American hawks in the military talk about it. And so be aware that this is really the target. China is the target, not just North Korea.
And why do you think Donald Trump, I mean, you said that he's obviously possibly under, certain lobby interests and some kind of manipulation possibly. But, I mean, you did touch upon that he was, his rhetoric was all anti-interventionist. And now it seems like his only option on the table with a lot of countries is military intervention.
No, well, I don't agree with that at all. I think he also has an option of pulling back from these foreign excursions and wars. He has that as an option, but he's surrounded by people who are putting immense amounts of pressure, feeding him false intelligence, we've been hearing as well, to do these things. I think if he had a little bit more backbone, he would be able to stand up to these people, go on national television and say, look, we've got a choice here. Either we sort out the United States domestically or we start thrashing out abroad. And I've decided to do the former. But, he is outnumbered in his cabinet, so it's difficult for him to push back. I think he needs to just show some mettle and make it clear that he's not going to do any more war crimes, because this attack this week in Syria is not only a crime under international law, it's also a crime under US law. We can't have a war criminal running the most powerful nuclear force in the world, can we? So he needs to row back on that.
And it just seems like he's not, entertaining a possible diplomacy before military action in any of these cases, is he?
Well, I think also again it's Tillerson, it's others that are putting pressure on it. I think, yes, there must be diplomacy, but I'm afraid Trump is sliding, really. I mean, when he came in, he was a very tough-sounding president. He was going to get his hands on the reins of power. I'm afraid that seems to be slipping away from him now.
Thank you for joining us once again, Mr. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, joining us out of Bristol.